The purpose of audio is to engross the player in a believable virtual environment. To be immersive, it needs to simultaneously integrate with and enhance the game's other core elements like its setting, subject matter, gameplay, visuals, and narrative. In this video, I'll explore the ambitious and creative ways Dead Space uses sound design to elevate the player experience, in addition to the odd choices and inevitable hiccups that come along the way. I'll dive into the distinct sounds of the necromorphs, the artistic expression of its weapons and equipment, the value of Foley sound effects, the benefits of an audibly frictionless and diegetic user interface, the significance of a strong atmosphere and ambience, how manipulating sound effects enrich the soundscape, the importance of good voice acting and direction in selling stories and events, and the importance of appropriately using a soundtrack. Sound is critical to convincing horror, and Dead Space is recognized for this because it incorporates it in all its aspects. Dead Space's necromorphs are rage-filled mutated bodies designed to kill and spread. They're a grotesque symphony that embody the game's core purpose to instill fear, shock, and dread in the player. They take center stage merely 10 minutes into the game, where a group of them ambush you and your crew. You flee as a chorus of shrieks layer one on top of the other to a frenetic backdrop of strings, horns, and drums. The tumultuous sequence peaks with a peekaboo, then plunges into a moment of reflection and reprieve. Elevator ambience and Isaac's pumping heartbeat fill the soundscape for a moment. This shift from high-octane tag to silence perfectly exemplifies the contrasting nature of the Dead Space experience, and sets the stage for the emotional roller coaster that awaits. Once free from the grip of a scuttling mentality, Dead Space's audio comes into its own and never looks back. Acquiring a weapon after this initial escape establishes a means of actual interaction with the necromorphs, and these interactions cover a wide range on the emotional spectrum. For one, Dead Space lets you sympathize. Wounded leapers wince like a dog. It's a familiar sound that tugs on our heartstrings, creating guilt despite being moments away from death. Necromorphs groan when walloped in the face. Slashers deliver short cries when staggered from a shot to the ankle, then wail once dismembered. Not only does the dragging sound of flesh reinforce their bloodlust, but also the sense of place in the physical space. The infected's wails are so excruciating and uneasy, they cloud your whole brain. Humanity is evidently fleeting and civil discourse is long gone, but having a twisted sense of sympathy for something that wants you dead isn't an act that I would call terribly outlandish. In fact, it brings meaning to something so alien and creates a lens to look at them beyond simple moving targets. On the other end of the emotional spectrum, the thrill of wielding significant power is nowhere more gratifying than when you hear the exploder's signature explosion sounds. When something akin to a flesh-filled mini-nuke sounds off because of you, you really do feel powerful. That same mighty feeling also comes over you when you hear the deep, muffled whoosh of the Leviathan being sucked into space. The examples shown so far contain reactions from necromorphs at their most vulnerable, where suffering's at its deepest. Prior to this state, they're at the most desperate, drowning in unbridled hysteria with an insatiable need to engineer you into a feast. There's the intricate slithering of the lurker's tentacles. It sounds faultless, like a well-oiled machine that's done it 1,000 times before. Then there's the startling scream of the slasher. The gurgling of 2 leapers. The deep growls of the brute. The moan of the exploder. The haunting cries of the wheezes. And the moans of the divider. It's a cry of terror that speaks to the twisted existence. These vocals are also expressive and unique. They are core elements of the corrupted personalities, so it is unfortunate that there are some instances where this hysteria becomes comical and downright goofy. To me, the slashers, and all their variants, are the prime offenders. A unique aspect of Dead Space, rarely imitated by other games, are the death scenes. They are visceral, cinematic sequences that showcase brutality with terrifying clarity, and they're all an audible treat. I like the Divider's tightening tentacles, the Lurker's tentacle spam, and the Leaper's tail strikes. The Leaper's strike produces the crispest, piercing thunk you'll ever hear. Even misses sound lethal. It works for 2 main reasons. Firstly, and most importantly, it's the timbre of the sound. It's forceful and blunt. Secondly, it's the structure of the sound wave. It's akin to familiar sounds like a gunshot or a slap, so it invokes similar feelings and taps into our primal fears. When you hear such sounds, your heart jumps. This tail strike is no different. The waveform reaches its loudest point very quickly and is then drawn out. It's louder than any sound both before and after it, so it demands your attention. Conversely, the drag tentacle's killing blow doesn't work. It produces what I can only describe as a hit marker sound. The sound wave is impactful in theory, structurally mimicking the Leaper's tail strike, but it has the wrong makeup applied. It sounds weak and flat out wrong. It might be the most deflating and disappointing sound in the game, akin to seeking bread in the pantry for a sandwich, only to find a single slice left, the heel of the loaf. I tend not to tinker with audio levels because to me, the default audio levels are the intended experience. Sometimes I will lower the music volume or increase the dialogue volume, but generally I leave them alone. With Dead Space's default volume settings, it's easy to maintain situational awareness. I do admit, it is in large part due to its use of audio techniques, which I cover in Chapter 6, but the distinct sounds of the necromorphs are also a relevant factor. With that in mind, one grievance I have is the lack of discernible audio feedback applied to most enemy footsteps. They're barely audible, only being pronounced once the enemy is in melee range. In some instances, they're basically silent, as shown with this Leaper, the Slasher, and even the Hunter. More on the Hunter a bit later. The feedback applied to Mr. Chen's footsteps is what I wanted applied universally. I can only surmise its absence was a technical limitation or an artistic decision to declutter the combat soundscapes. Regardless, they're akin to Resident Evil 2's Mr. X's defining characteristic, his ominous stomps. This is a good time to bring up the Hunter. To summarize, for a small portion of the game, a necromorph appropriately named the Hunter hunts you. The Hunter plays a notable role in the story, but as a presence, he's a mixed bag. He chases you, circumventing conventional travel paths or using vents to get around. The resulting reverberations are nail-biting. I'm not sure whether the sound effects are artificially placed or physics-based, but they're effective. My guess would be the former to save resources, but the ambiguity is negligible. The audible thud when he drops from the vents is great. So it's unfortunate the audio feedback isn't carried over to the regular enemies as well. Finally, it's too bad his guttural growls are of such low frequency that they're devoid of any visceral intensity. His stifled vocals damage his appeal and undermine his role as a menacing stalker. In the game's climax, you encounter the prodigious flesh cathedral known as the Hive Mind. The reveal is a shot of adrenaline. Its acid attack sounds virulent. Sadly, its screech sounds like a revving engine, and when it slams its limbs it sounds small, like it came from a monster half the size of you. It also sounds weak, like the final flathing whimper of a defeated boxer. When it collapses to death, this is what it sounds like. Sonically, it's such a letdown, as once again the audio doesn't communicate the colossal size of the creature. The result is a victory lacking impact and satisfaction. The sounds are high quality, but they should have prioritized communicating the impact of the landing body, as opposed to the acid belch. They really missed the mark here in my opinion. With the final boss covered, it's time to move on to Isaac's weaponry, which barring the pulse rifle and a couple of nitpicks, sound absolutely amazing. The tried and true plasma cutter is clean and snappy. The short waveform mimics a pistol, and the sizzling conveys the plasma energy. The crisp ejection of spent ammunition cartridges and polished insertion of new ones leaves no doubt about its efficiency and durability. It's easy to believe that it will cleanly cut most things with ease. The line gun is great, and shares a similar sound base with the plasma cutter. While I wish the primary fire had more distinct audio cues to better differentiate it from the plasma cutter, I cannot deny the lowered pitch makes it sound genuinely lethal. The secondary fire sounds just as lethal. And the intricate mechanical sounds of the weapon readying never get old. The force gun is incredibly resonant. The primary fire packs a powerful sonic punch, and the secondary fire gravity well is just a wonderful cacophony of lightning, crackling, and warping. The sound of physical resistance during the reload brings tangibility to the movement, and the resulting cockback from the momentum is purposefully loud. The absurd level of detail brings the gun to life. From the point of ignition, the contact beam sounds destructive. Holding down the primary fire creates a sound that gradually increases in pitch, while an intermittent, airy, guttural sound plays. Immediately, the secondary fire has even more of a presence due to the more formidable ignition. The resulting explosion sounds powerful thanks to its low to mid frequencies, large dynamic range, and long waveform. flamethrower's primary fire is a rich soundscape. A continuous stream of rumbling bass evokes the relentless flow of fire, punctuated by violent whooshes that capture the roar of the flames. The secondary fire builds upon this foundation by intensifying the roar with added hisses. I would have liked a more threatening soundscape when surrounded by the flame walls. As an aside, the way the flamethrower darkens your surrounding vision is a great touch, because it forces focus on the mess you've made. My feelings on the Reaper are a hodgepodge. Its primary fire accurately sounds like a rotating saw, but it lacks raw power. Personally, I'd have liked more focus on lower frequencies to beef it up a bit, but it's well done. The secondary fire sounds frantic and chaotic, so nothing but praise there. Finally, there is the pulse rifle. Technically the only actual weapon in your arsenal, this technicality might be the cause of the problem. It sounds ordinary and weak, devoid of personality and artistic touch. It's the ugly duckling of the group, and I get no enjoyment using it. The weapons you find scattered around the environment are grounded, found on benches and corpses as opposed to being bought from the shop. They are tangible objects, and their discovery comes with stories of desperate struggle and resource management that reinforces the physical connection you and their former owners have with the decaying environment. Dead Space's primary setting is the industrial and futuristic planet-cracking starship, the USG Ishimura. The confined space and limiting nature of the ship presents a challenge for a developer. How do you ensure it doesn't feel repetitive? Dead Space's varied and discernible audio alleviates this challenge and in turn opens a wide world of interactivity to embrace. The vast amount of Foley sound effects give it a sense of place, and dynamism is created via a game system called Alive, which gives Isaac dynamic breathing and heart rate sound effects. I'll discuss the system in detail later, but to summarize, it seamlessly contextualizes Isaac's situation and tells the player how they should feel. Going from head to toe, let's start with Isaac's head. Isaac interacts with his helmet at the beginning upon returning to his ship, the USG Kellyan, and at the end of the game when he boards the evacuation vessel. In the first scenario, Isaac seamlessly removes his helmet in one smooth motion. In the second scenario, he exerts himself, as friction echoes from accumulated sweat and debris until the helmet finally comes off. This is a precise and thoughtful way to communicate that an arduous passage of time has passed, that drive can overcome hardship. The audio cues communicate this so well that even without visuals, you'd be able to draw a similar conclusion. Moving down from Isaac's head, we have his hands. You can hit objects with your gun, levitate objects with your glove, and interact with much more. Sound plays a huge part in making these objects feel tangible and purpose-built for the location they're in. Hanging corpses produce sounds of clothing material being rubbed. Furniture leather squeaks when it's dragged on metal flooring. And metal on metal is as grating and fondly utilitarian as one would expect. When it comes to hitting objects with your gun, there is one audio issue I noticed. It seems that if too many objects are caught in your swing, too many sound effects require processing, so the audio engine freaks out and glitches. But when it functions, it's fun to do and it sounds good. The sound of electricity fizzling out from a sign changes depending on whether you hit it or shoot it. This unnecessary attention to detail is so nice. It feels like different actions have different consequences, which reinforces the believability of the environment. Not only is it visual, it's audible. In addition to hitting things, you can use kinesis with your kinetic module to levitate and propel objects. This interactivity adds another layer to the audio design. Hurling the chunky corpse of a necromorph into a moving fan produces a fitting sound of an object getting sliced. Scraping a rod against a metal wall produces a variety of clings and clangs. The difference between dropping a box next to you versus the other side of the corridor is also clearly apparent. These subtle variations in outcome make it feel truly interactive and add another layer of realism to the environment. Shifting to more complex soundscapes, I want to gush over a detailed sequence from a seemingly trivial interaction, namely the removal of power cells from electrical ports. Have a listen first. It blows my mind how much is happening here. Firstly, we can hear the release trigger as the port light turns red. Secondly, the battery completely dislodges from the port. Thirdly, the battery smashes into the wall with such force it produces a strong sound of impact. Then there are the high-pitched beeps which indicate that the port is empty. Alongside these beeps, there's a low-pitched, almost pneumatic sound, like rods moving. To top it all off, sparks fly and fill the high end of the frequency spectrum. It's methodical and every sound is identifiable. The whole sequence is masterfully done. It's one thing to find the perfect sample, modify it and apply it to an action, but it's another level of mastery to create a sequence of sustained excellence that sounds like a seamless package. You can hear the amount of work that's gone into making it. Other noteworthy moments with kinesis include corpses hitting metal. Sometimes this sounds suitable, but other times it's comically inappropriate. The audio is the same for both examples, but in context only the former works. I also noticed one peculiarity when propelling specimen jars. Listen to how the first one has no sound of glass shattering, while the second one does. It seems the audio is limited to a specific angle of impact. Now we finally come to Isaac's feet. Generally, I'm extremely fond of footstep sounds and I put a lot of value into them because they are, as near as makes no difference, constantly playing. It's a repetitive sound that can easily turn hypnotic, and Isaac's footsteps strike a chord with me. Clad in his heavy-duty suit, Isaac's footsteps produce percussive thuds that echo throughout the environment. Its tactility is on full display as soon as you exit your ship. In narrow corridors, the footsteps reverberate for a more enriching sound. And walking on flesh is sufficiently disgusting. To sweeten the deal, your stomps are brutal too, and I love how much Dead Space leans into it. They're full of force and accented by the sickening squelch of blood splatter. From what I can tell, the game cycles through a pool of stomping sounds and they all sound great. Additionally, some metal surfaces make their own distinct sound when stomped on, such as this one in front of the shop. But the best bit has to be how the game applies reverb to the stomp if it deems it appropriate. Compare this stomp with no reverb to this stomp with reverb. It is lovely. The Alive system that I mentioned earlier is an acronym for Adrenaline, Limbic System Response, Intelligent Dialogue, Vitals, and Exertions. The contextualization of Isaac's human traits, such as fatigue, exertion, and vitality, is a means of communication between the game and the player. He exerts cries of duress, throws insults, and his heart rate spikes when he stomps for too long. In this example, the stomps tire Isaac out, which leads to tired exhales before he delivers his line. Here he's got a sliver of health left, which leads to a more defeated delivery of his line.
No, but I found a stasis module. Faster than I got it.
Compared to the smoother delivery when on high health.
No, but I found a stasis module. If I'm faster than I got it.
He winces in pain on low health, and vents his frustration when his weapon runs out of ammo. Details to this degree are often synonymous with love for what you're doing, so I really do appreciate this. Attention to detail should always be valued. It reveals the spectacular, the mysterious, and the beauty of intention. Intention that can be considered deeply personal. Naturally, this doesn't always translate into something engaging, fun, or compelling. Unfortunately, it sometimes has inverse effects too. Take Isaac's heartbeat for example. I appreciate the effort that's gone into implementing it, but I just find it irksome and distracting, especially in moments when I don't actually empathize with his fear. Role-playing is an intrinsic aspect of interactive media. The ideal scenario is for a player to assume the role of the protagonist regardless of the camera perspective. A first-person camera fosters a more seamless experience, but a third-person camera doesn't completely negate this, especially for those that have a knack of getting lost in the world and its characters. In that instance with this heartbeat, the live system created conflict between Isaac and myself. There's a damaging disconnect there that could have been avoided, but in this same breath, I look at Isaac's reaction when he suffers from low oxygen, and think to myself, yes, I like that reaction and can relate to it. Others might find this intrusive. It's quandaries like this that developers constantly face because of how subjective everything is. Having options is usually the perfect crowd pleaser because that allows visions to be maintained with the least amount of sacrifice. This can be done in the form of individual toggleable options in the menu, but that's purely not feasible, especially for something that's so minor in the grand scheme of things. Ultimately, the developers had a vision and they achieved it. Some players will resonate with it, some won't, and that's okay. Moving on, let's explore the soundscapes surrounding interactive objects. Devices such as the bench, shop, doors, and save stations all have their own crafted soundscapes. The bench is full of distinct sounds. Notice the sounds it makes as it raises, and the side flaps and panels stand open. When you leave the bench, the flap for the weapon, side flap, and the bench itself descend until it finally locks into place. Even better is the bench doesn't descend in one smooth gliding motion, but a series of jerky movements, and the audio reflects this. The shop boasts its own vibrant soundscape, with a welcoming jingle when approached. It emits a glowing sound when it unveils its stock, and emits soft, clickety, and motion-evoking sounds when it retracts. Doors follow a similar pattern, using a combination of motion-based sounds when approached, and vibrant jingles as clear audio cues. Save stations also emphasize movement, however they're a lot more high-pitched to convey a sense of safety. It's the hyper-focus on how these interactive elements sound both on their own and together that create the concrete experience. This continues once we access these interactive elements, where we are greeted with one of the most immaculate user interfaces out there. The user interface in Dead Space combines artistic flair and futuristic touch to be captivating, clean, and seamless. There is synergy throughout the UI where important actions are denoted by flashy sound effects. While movement within menus is kept subtle. No sound is jarring nor distracting. Opening the inventory is an event, conveyed by a deep, reverb-heavy rumble that accompanies the beeps. Navigating the inventory and bench remain a smooth listening experience even 2 playthroughs later. The mission complete sound is a swift thrill which sounds like an old Mac startup chime. Since the UI is diegetic, what would have been the cherry on top is for its sound to be manipulated by the space you're in. As far as I can tell, the UI sounds the same no matter where it's opened from. A simple example would be to play more reverb if you're in a small room as opposed to outside. It's an unneeded additional layer on what's already a detailed soundscape, but it would have been cool. Ultimately, the diegetic UI allows us to stay conscious of and be grounded in the environment that Isaac inhabits. It empowers the sounds of the environment by maintaining a constant connection with the player. Its undisruptive presence is crucial as it allows the potent atmosphere and ambience to actually exist and be noticed in the space. While often interchangeable, the distinguishable nuances of atmosphere and ambience allow the two to be separated in the context of Dead Space. Through the intense exploration of horror, and the valuable variety that results from it, one can describe Ishimura's atmosphere as eerie and unrelenting, but at the same time, describe the ambience as tainted and cold. The necromorph's predatory and pack-like behavior create such an atmosphere, while the sensory implications stemming from their existence and physical makeup of the environment, be it jagged metal walls or high color temperatures, create such ambient qualities. I'm not going to get bogged down on semantics, so the point is, while I may use both terms in this chapter, what matters is that they both influence how we feel. By creatively applying atmosphere and ambience to both primary and liminal spaces, we can be consistently immersed in our environments. This is immediately made manifest on the Ishimura in 3 ways. Firstly, there are overlapping intercom announcements. It's such a little thing, but it adds profoundness to the space. I imagine the overlapping is intentional, but I'm unable to confidently deduce why. The announcements may have always overlapped, highlighting the many rooms and busy nature of the ship. Alternatively, it might be used to convey how the breakout has caused technology to malfunction. Perhaps the marker is manipulating it in some way. Thinking pessimistically, it could also be a developer oversight, but I just don't think that's the case. Then there are the interactive doors. They don't open in one smooth motion, nor is the sound they emit one smooth waveform. Notice how there are 2 sections to it. It opens a fraction, stops briefly, and then resumes. The halt that splits the 2 sections is deliberately cumbersome, but as a whole the animation and the accompanying sound flows really well. The jerkiness is mechanical, the movement is tangible, the vibe is futuristic, and the mood is foreboding. It's the perfect Ishimura door. Lastly, there's the quarantine lockdown that I mentioned earlier. It works particularly well here because it's diegetic. It's triggered by the Ishimura's defense system and reported on by the PA system. When it triggers, it is an alarming, well-earned jump scare.
Power to the elevator should be next. Hazardous anomaly detected.
The blast shutters swiftly deploy as the ominous proclamation of a hazardous anomaly detected reverberates throughout the space. Accompanied by a siren that gradually ascends in pitch, the tension builds, resembling a summoning signal for the imminent ambush.
with the neighbors. There's something we feel with them.
Essentially, it is a function of the three, and they work beautifully together. The intercoms announce the ambience of the spaces. The doors function as a harmonic link between these spaces, and the quarantine sets the horror atmosphere. The tone and mood is established, the Ishimura is awakened, and it is up to the rest of the game to build upon this strong foundation. And boy does it do it with confidence. Later in the game you end up locked in a decon chamber where another quarantine sequence occurs. This predicament is completely different because there's very little space to maneuver. All exits are locked and the objective is to survive. Once you trigger the quarantine, the blast shutters close slowly in screeching harmony, then a choir of purifying air shoots down from the valves. Distant growls echo from approaching necromorphs as all hell breaks loose in an intensely stimulating sequence with zero concessions. This intensity carries across to evacuations as well, which are frankly borderline traumatic. If you've ever been part of an emergency evacuation, you might know what I mean.
Warning, primary systems failure. Evacuate immediately. Heat exchanger offline.
For a developer, unpredictability is a very valuable design element because it forces you, the player, to ruthlessly revise how you feel in real time. It keeps you engaged and reactive. Dead Space is keenly aware of this, so it mixes it up by presenting environmental jump scares beyond the reoccurring but well-placed quarantine lockdown. Sequences like necromorph surprises, water surges, and pipe bursts create the uninviting atmosphere that constantly keeps you on edge. Dead Space's hunger for unpredictability fits great alongside its ability to recontextualize the point of and feeling evoked in the physical space. By design, elevators are claustrophobic. You're encapsulated into a tight area, yet as physically restrictive as it may be, this space can be manipulated in many ways. I've already covered the solacing elevator. Just as significant but in stark contrast, there's the dreadful ambience and suffocating atmosphere of the horizontal lift in mining. As you just saw, much like in the first elevator, nothing actually happens. The mood differs greatly, but in both instances, these transportation systems provide safety. The game just toys with you and it works. Dead Space doesn't stop there though, as it constructs what's effectively a fight pit, a cruel machination on a descent down to the lowest foundations of an industrial hell. The soundscape is extremely intricate, with no less than 17 unique sound effects over 20 seconds, from the moment things start to go wrong to the moment the first necromorph appears. What a soundscape. Dead Space has many rich atmospheric and ambient arrangements that exist for many purposes, and I want to begin with the tram. The tram is used to quickly travel to different sections of the Ishimura. You use it often, and to me it never loses its luster. Despite its imposingly jagged and industrial visage, at the heart of it, it's the only bastion on the Ishimura. It sounds composed and comforting, akin to a delightful drone. To cap it all off, the sounds as the door opens and the ramp deploys are delicate and welcoming. While the tram does approach you, it doesn't leave you. It it remains steady and comfort doesn't cease until you leave it. The sacrifice of the only safe space you have isn't under its discretion, but yours. It's a popular, recurring psychological game, and I really like it. Another memorable sequence, which is also often used as a landmark for navigation, is the headbanging crew member. There are many sound techniques used in this sequence, which I'll come back to later. For now, I want to highlight the sounds themselves, namely the thuds, piercing glass crack, and aptly crass sound of the madman's head sliding down the window. Step by step, you slowly learn that it's a man influenced by the marker. If the encounter with the tram is a portal to comfort, then this encounter is a portal to dread. You call for comfort while dread calls for you. That's the key distinction. Dead Space drip feeds this scripted sequence upon you. It is a dreadful taunt by a psychological antagonist conveyed through sound. It's one of the most memorable sequences, and sound is the main reason why. Significant effort goes into selling the presence of large machinery. Their auras permeate the environment, so naturally there are points of focus for creating a distinctive mood. On the way to zero-G therapy, you encounter a colossal chamber that dramatically unveils itself with meticulous directional audio. The same occurs before the Leviathan boss fight. Grand reveals of this scale are instinctually nerve-wracking. They are foreboding as our immediate existence feels threatened. The thermodynamic purifiers housed within hydroponics emit an aura of danger with the sound alone. The sound of the valve as it opens is striking, but the true spectacle is the subsequent spool and torrential rush of fire. The audio composition perfectly captures the immense velocity. As a bonus, I incidentally managed to create a moment reminiscent of the Terminator 2 nuke scene, which further added to the fire's destructive nature. As you can hopefully hear for yourselves, these soundscapes are loud, but they remain clear and detailed. This continues, like in this corridor near the morgue elevator, where you can actually hear the explosion approaching you and the windows shattering on either side. In the engine room, the machinery actually sounds like gigantic structures in motion. While initially it sounds too intense, the fast-paced rhythmic throbs layered with a consistently warm hum create a therapeutic environment. The sheer enormity of the mineral processing machine is unmistakable. Its vast scale is communicated through the powerful vibrations of the shaking flaps and buffeting. Large machinery takes precedence, but as mentioned earlier, tertiary rooms and liminal spaces hold their own in unique ways to maintain atmosphere and ambience. One of my favorites is the security room on the way to the morgue. It's a nice little intimate moment. In the foreground, a bulb rings as it shifts color temperature. In the background, sizzling sparks accompany a repeating sub-bass drop. It's a subtle soundscape, but with calamitous suggestions. Another room that caught my ear centered around dripping water. The two different droplet sounds are the focal point of the soundscape, while sparks and flickering light play a part. It really does drip with a dire atmosphere. To conclude this chapter, I like to run through some of my favorite moments of atmosphere and ambience. Screens flicker in this locker room. Lights flicker in the adjacent room. There's composed flickers. Wild flickers. There's also the monkey and cricket arena. Sparks ejecting. Fans grating. Fans exploding. Structural breaches. The fizzling sound from the save station. Valve leaks. Fire embers. Angry neighbors. Moans. Taunting marker hallucinations. Recreational activities. And sonorous knocks which sound like two animal skulls being hit together, pitched down. One-off moments like this are littered throughout the game, making the experience fresh and compelling. Yet with all of these examples, what makes them truly shine are the audio techniques applied to them. Dead space accounts for how sound travels and the physical properties of the environment to ensure it is meaningfully communicated to the player. It incorporates many audio techniques to accurately simulate sound and immerse us in the environment. The audio techniques I like to cover are obstruction, occlusion, distance attenuation, directional sound, and sound repositioning. The examples I cover in each category are not exhaustive, but should give you a good idea of each technique's effect on a sound and how it enhances the soundscape. Starting with obstruction, to obstruct a sound is to partially block it, so only a portion of it is audible. In this first example, the slasher's vocals and movement are around the metal wall and up in the vents. The sound is obstructed as a result, so both muffled direct signals and some indirect signals are heard. In this second example with a headbanging crew member, notice two things. First, how the sound of the thud changes as I move from direct view of him to behind the wall. And second, the continual change in sound as I move further away. This final example is of a slasher in an adjacent hall to my right. The direct signal of its snarls is obstructed by the wall, but indirect signals funnel out of the doorway too. Since there is a glass window present, I think the signals are partially occluded as well. Varying degrees of obstruction and occlusion are often applied at the same time. Occlusion is when both direct and reflected indirect signals are completely blocked so you cannot hear the sound at all. Thick metal doors are suitable for completely blocking sounds, as can be seen in this example where the sound of the sprinklers are completely culled when the door is shut. When it comes to occlusion, liberties have been taken. Consistency and realism have been sacrificed for the sake of storytelling, world building, and setting a mood. In this first example, the source of sound is on the other side of the metal door. This is the same metal door that completely culled the loud sprinkler sound earlier. However, here we can hear both sounds, a muffled version of the slasher and crew member. They basically took the occluding characteristics of a glass window and applied it to this metal door. The same thing is done in this next example, where the officer's pleas are muffled until the door opens.
God, hold the line.
She's speaking rather quietly too. I think they made the right decisions here. They're more impactful with a dose of drama and ominousness respectively. Loud machinery is also occluded. Active machinery can be heard beyond metal doors, such as in this example where the sound is muffled until the door is opened. Once you enter, the soundscape changes into a textured roar with subtle high-pitched glints.
Exiting zero gravity.
The absurdly high volume of the machinery creates a sense of unease, as it completely blocks your ability to use sound as a means of enemy detection. Should an enemy creep up on you, you wouldn't be able to hear it. You feel like a defenseless fish swimming in the dangerous open water as the engine of a boat loudly echoes nearby. The next technique is distance attenuation. Distance attenuation is how the intensity of a sound changes as you move from the source of the sound. In other words, the further you are from the source, the quieter the sound will be. The reward for the simplest and coolest showcase of this technique goes to the scripter charging Twitcher in Chapter 9. It starts off quiet, but gradually gets louder as it approaches. Here's another example because it sounds so cool. Sound is attenuated in winding spaces too. This sleeper is around 2 corners and both its distance and approach is easy to hear. This technique isn't limited to enemies either. Approach slamming doors and they naturally get louder. So loud, the danger they pose is clearly communicated. My favorite example of attenuated environmental sounds has to be in the long white corridor on the west refrigeration tower. There's a moving machine with a light of some kind. I don't exactly know what it is, but it's so satisfying. By allowing enemies to interact with the environment, you really get to appreciate the intricate soundscape the game can create. Such as in this next example with 2 vents to my left to break at roughly the same time. One is next to me while the other is just beyond the bridge. There are completely different distances, so the intensity varies. The one closer to me is obviously much louder, but even so, pinpointing the location of the farther one is incredibly easy. I've combined the next 2 techniques since there's some overlap. Directional sound focuses on having audio come from a particular direction or point in space. Sound repositioning is the repositioning of sound based on the layout of the environment and where you are in relation to the actual source of the signal. Dead Space uses portals placed around the environment to reposition where sounds are emitted from, leading to more accurate directional sound, distance attenuation, and filtering. My favorite sequence that demonstrates how these techniques can enhance the experience is the sequence with the headbanging crew member that I discussed earlier. As a reminder, it takes place at the end of a long widened corridor, making it the perfect playground. The source of the signal is the crew member, more specifically, his head repeatedly hitting the glass window. As you listen to this example, Note how the source is to my right, but most of the sound is coming from my left, simulating how it travels through the corridor. Additionally, as I get closer to the source, the sound intensifies as well. It's an incredibly suspenseful sequence where the silence is shattered by the reverberating thud of his exposed skull hitting the glass. These techniques are executed so accurately they're essentially an ally in combat. Combining this technique with the necromorph's unique and attenuated cries makes it really easy to pinpoint where and from whom sounds are coming from. Here's a quick compilation of what I mean. Directional sound isn't limited to mortar soundscapes. Amidst chaotic encounters like this one, the soundscape remains distinct and decipherable, making it easy to be aware of your surroundings. Beyond the living, these techniques also enhance the hostile presence of large machinery and the space they're contained in. I bring up the slamming doors from earlier as the first example to highlight how their signal seems to travel and bounce around in corridors, creating effects where initially you hear the direct signal from the door slamming primarily on your right, and then milliseconds later you can hear the echo from indirect reflected signals further down the corridor on your left. In this second example, the control room has two doors leading back to the cryo chamber. Since only the left door is opened, the sound of gushing liquid nitrogen pours in mostly from the left door.
Initiating cryogenic freeze. Cryogenic freeze complete. Transferring specimen.
In this final example, the sounds of the escape vessel filling the soundscape as it maneuvers around me and enters zero gravity really sells the imposing size of the vessel. As you can imagine, applying all of these techniques to a single sequence leads to extremely dynamic soundscapes. So let's see how these techniques all work together in these two recordings of Nicole. In this first recording, Nicole's voice is the source of the signal. Her voice is attenuated as I move away from her, and then obstructed when I enter the small room with the glass window. While in it, the sound is both partially obstructed and occluded. Once I approach the window to my right, her muffled voice makes the occlusion particularly noticeable. In this second recording, once again her voice is the source. Initially we can hear both direct and indirect signals funneling out of the doorway of the small room.
The vial shares genetic markers with human DNA and postmortem spasms. seen in other specimens. Seen this one dead bioanesthetic cells. The dead tissue is absorbed, recombined, then reanimated. The vial shares genetic markers with human DNA and it's all connected to the marker from Aegis 7, but how?
The voice acting is a motley collection, so I'll first cover what I like. Isaac's voice actor Gunnar Wright is the real deal. As mentioned earlier, the Alive system allows Gunnar to add emotional depth to Isaac and really showcase the humane struggles of being in such an environment and situation. His lines are excellent. Listen to his stormy delivery when he encounters the Hive mind.
This is all I got left!
It is so convincing that I somehow would feel like I'd be betraying Gunnar if I was to die here. There's also Isaac's primal agonal screams when he's set on fire. And the emphasis on the word fuck during the transformation cutscene. Beyond emotions, Isaac's swift problem-solving technobabble is delivered with such confidence here that it almost leaves Daniel speechless.
So we're screwed.
No, it was sloppy work. Some of the dishes are intact. If I replace them and create a new circuit with no gaps, we could broadcast a signal. Short range only, but it should work.
Okay, do it. I'll, keep an eye on things here.
Tanya Clark, who voices Nicole Brennan, is great. When working, she's an educated professional in her field with a penchant for knowledge.
It's all connected to the marker from Aegis 7, but how? Dr. Kine studied the marker. Dr. Kine has vanished. Unless he's with the survivors on the mining deck.
But is often struck with anxiety and stress over the sheer unknowingness of the situation.
He didn't understand how this tragedy represents a chance to cure death.
When speaking with Isaac, her emotional range increases, highlighting the personal relationship she has fostered with him.
Nicole?
I'm so sorry, Isaac. Look at the time difference. I'll call you back later.
It's okay.
Dr. Mercer's voice acting is
Remarkable.
okay, it's not that groundbreaking, but he's still a very compelling character and my favorite in the game. Farhan Tahir does an excellent job in portraying a menacing and arrogant doctor seeking ascension. His cold delivery and chilling cadence remind me of Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. Soon after, when Dr. Mercer finally confronts Isaac, his inflections, pacing, breaks, silence, and snickering all come together to heighten the weight of his motivations.
Are you the reason the marker won't begin? That's it. Convergence is installed. She's meddling.
It's a really compelling scene. A couple of other moments I love is his devilishly Machiavellian shift in character when asking for the trauma team.
I expect death within the hour, but the changes to the vascular system are very promising. One moment for the cleanup. For the last time, get a trauma team in here. Yes, I called 3 times. My patient is crashing. Get off your smoke break and help me.
And this one bone-chilling line during the experiment on Harris.
Tormenting someone for being a little different. Don't listen. A good skin.
Bridget Kali Canales voices Kendra Daniels and delivers a solid performance. Eventually. Through no fault of her own, early on she feels hampered by the writing direction.
The ones I saw, some of them were wearing Ishimura uniforms.
They're the crew? How the hell can they be the crew? Look at them.
That final line really bugs me, because she's presented as showing reluctance and disbelief to the fact that it is the crew, rather than being in shock that it could be the crew. Once we start hearing the fear in her voice, then she comes into her stride. Like here when she returns from being MIA for a while.
Glad to disappoint. I barricaded myself in the computer core. I can hear them, but I don't think they know I'm here.
The whispers highlight for her newfound worry and care for herself, Isaac, and Hammond. Concluding what I like, this tertiary crew member's death scene sounds great. Now onto what I flat out dislike. First, there's Zach Hammond, whose writing and direction is bizarre. Voiced by the capable Anthony Alabi, nearly every scene with him falls short. His delivery of God sounds so fake, like he doesn't actually care, but says it just so Isaac doesn't lecture him on the gravity of the situation.
I saw it, Hammond. A flying one turned the captain's body into another one of those things. The same must have happened to Chen.
God. Maybe the command computer has something.
Then he rhetorically asks where Daniels is, like he's inconvenienced and annoyed at her for disappearing on this giant doomed ship, full of the most hostile living things anyone has ever seen in their entire life.
Where's Daniels in here?
As Isaac once said.
But it makes no sense.
Let's also not forget that prior to this he saw Chen get stabbed and chase him, so it's not like he doesn't have any inkling on why Kendra could be missing. Minutes later, the Ishimura shakes, Isaac freaks out, Hammond says the Ishimura is on a crash course for Aegis 7, retorts that Isaac's plan won't work, offers an alternative that he just uncovered, and yet throughout this whole exchange, his performance is flatter than the Maldives.
Isaac,
I'm here. What the hell's happening?
the computer says the Ishimura's engines are offline. We're on a decaying orbit toward Aegis 7.
Oh god. I have to get to engineering.
There's no time. That tram station's offline. Unless... Here. Head back to the flight deck. I'll guide you from there. If this damage report's right, there's a shortcut to engineering.
In this next example, his delivery is so stilted and emotionally weightless.
The Valor's munition logs. It wasn't just a nuke. They came loaded for war and destroy. This was no patrol. They knew about the Ishimura. Someone knew. We were all dead from the moment we arrived.
I don't understand why this was the chosen take, or the direction they went with. Check out his performance in the Apex Legends short Fight Night. I've linked it below and you'll quickly see the emotional range he has, and that it's just not been utilized here, which is disappointing.
Who sent you? I want a name.
I want a name too. What is it?
I'm asking the questions, Coat Rack.
Finally, there's Dr. Terrence Kine, voiced by Pej Vadat. Dr. Kine is directed to be the voice of reason, which is communicated through his timid and soft-spoken approach. This is my biggest issue because it inadvertently paints him as a mere apprentice, rather than a confident doctor with presence. This really shows in his exchange with Supervisor Dallas. Everything he says, and the tone in which he says it, has a whiff of flimsiness and weightlessness. He's clearly desperate, but saying things like no and don't you dare compare me to someone like Mercer makes him look weak and inadequate.
No, Ben was an accident. Don't you dare compare me to someone like Mercer.
Also, there are times where his delivery is really strange, such as this conversation with Dr. Mercer regarding the tests on Harris. There is a peculiar emphasis on the word colony, and an odd break before blood.
Given the reports from the colony, he's lucky to have his faculties at all. Well, a divine experience would leave an impression on anyone's mind. Perhaps. But I saw nothing divine in all that blood.
It might be irrational, but they really bother me. All in all, I really think they missed the mark with Dr. Kine. That covers the cast, so let's finish with the original soundtrack. The Dead Space original soundtrack is composed by Trevor Godekis. It is a collection of tense orchestral arrangements and slow, moody arrangements. It dynamically changes, adapting to various gameplay parameters and situations to enhance what's on screen. While this does create plenty of illusions to impress the imaginative, this embellishment sometimes backfires, leading to situations of misaligned and misplaced music. Focusing on the positives first, let's revisit the fleeing sequence early in the game. It's brilliant. The assemblage of horns, drums, and strings erupts into a wild crescendo and then fades into silence. It is jarring, fast, and rhythmic. In this next example, a vent shatters from its hinges. There's a moment of silence once the necromorph appears, and then the music starts. This dramatic tension and release ups the ante for the ensuing combat encounter. The silence has a similar effect to the pregnant pause in Father Gascoigne the Hunter's theme. The final combat example I want to show is how perfectly the frantic music matches the intensity of the charging leaper. It's such a sensory hit in all the right ways. Moving on to how the soundtrack enhances the environment, check out this example where strings delicately crescendo and culminates into what sound like a gong and other percussion, which emphasize the grandeur of the giant chamber. Upgrading your arsenal and armor sounds rewarding too. Triumphant music is used as positive reinforcement, aspiring belief and bravery to push forward. It's also used to sweeten the pot. While expensive, better armor is such a demonstrably useful upgrade that further motivation is not needed, but in all honesty, the music alone is enough to justify continual upgrading. The song Zero Gravity, while clearly inspired by Alien's main theme, gradually builds in intensity and conveys the unease of empty space. Make Us Whole has similar melodies, but amps it up to sound extremely ominous. The Hive Mind's use of unconventional sounds make it a riveting piece. I'm pretty sure an apprehension engine made these sounds. It's intriguing and a perfect fit for this game. Nicole's piano theme is sonically a far cry from the rest of the soundtrack. It's a mournful reminder of how even the most cherished things can erode with time, and no amount of love can stop it. In addition to intended moments, the soundtrack can also create incidental moments of audio-visual synergy, such as here where the startling music perfectly lines up with the plasma cutter's torch. Or here where the foreboding music sets unease on inventory management. Coincidences, sure, but they made their own luck. However, I can't help but leave with mixed feelings. Too often I feel the music is a disservice to the experience because it hinders the impact of the horror. Much of the subject matter is effective on its own, but ultimately tainted by external noise. Two examples solidify this for me. The first involves the Guardians. Here is the encounter with music disabled. And here is the same encounter with music enabled. To me, the organic moans create the fear. The music simply gilds the lily and clogs up the feed. The second example returns us once again to the head-banging crew member. Here is the encounter with music disabled. And here is the same encounter with music enabled. The music is a distraction. It would be more haunting without it because the juxtaposition would drive the suspense. It would allow the reverberating thuds to breathe, with nothing but palpable silence to separate them. Additionally, the music accompanying the scares often feel either misplaced or inappropriate, largely due to the disparity between the fear the game wants to convey and my lack of fear in that moment, sometimes due to the music itself. Here it undermines the leap of jump scare. This pipe burst, and this crying baby. There's just too much music being played. There's superfluous additions to completed scenes. Heightening distinctions and creating contrast elucidates depth, and depth is too often lost because music fills in the gaps. Dead Space has an unyielding auditory experience. Its soundscapes are a focused assemblage of distinctive sounds that elevate the game's core elements of setting, gameplay, visuals, and narrative. It sets a high bar with bone-chilling enemies, unique weapons, a relatable main character, interactivity, a clean UI, tons of atmosphere and ambience, many audio techniques, and a fitting soundtrack. Though with such artful depictions and ambitious manipulations of sound, there's bound to be some missteps. Disparity will often sprout in ambitious fields. In creative spheres where both good and bad creations exist, disparity in quality is unique. It is unlike the relationship between life and death or abundance and famine. Death and famine elevate our appreciation of greener pastures. When it comes to what we deem a bad design choice, rather than immediately valuing good design, we tend to yearn for the bad to be better, especially when the other aspects are so good. I apply the term bad rather loosely to Dead Space. Some enemies sound inappropriate, the pulse rifle lacks personality, the voice acting is often underwhelming, and the soundtrack can be disruptive. These are all me blemishes that I lose little to no sleep over. When it's all said and done, Dead Space is an auditory feast. Ambition and creativity are the fuel that allow us to reach frontiers previously deemed too far, so we should celebrate those willing to push the limit. What makes Dead Space whole is that it meticulously weaves a sonic string into its tapestry with such relentless ambition and creativity, thereby transforming a mere visceral splatter montage into a truly indelible horror experience. Thank you for watching.